eyes. A beautiful young girl suffered a terrible accident at the age of 18 and became blind. She went through bouts of depression and hated herself. On her 25th birthday, she sat in the park feeling sorry for herself when a stranger sat beside her and struck up a conversation. A little while later, they were walking around the park laughing and chatting. The girl felt very at ease with the man, and he asked for her number. After a few dates, they became boyfriend and girlfriend. The girl began to fall in love with the man, but was still very hurt about having no sight. She mentioned it in passing every day and often said if there was one thing she could wish for, it would be her sight back. The man fell head over heels in love with her, and after a year of dating, asked for her hand in marriage. The girl immediately declined and told him he didn't want to marry a blind girl. "The only way I will marry you is if I can see the world again." A few years later, a revolutionary eye surgery had arrived, and the girl immediately signed up. She waited 3 months for a matching eye donation. The day finally came. Matt, her boyfriend, went with her for moral support. After the surgery, the girl could see instantly. She could see the world again and was so happy. When Matt walked in, she was shocked to discover he was blind. She felt betrayed that he didn't tell her and told him she could never marry someone like him. A few days later, a letter arrived through the post. She was so happy to see a letter addressed to her, she immediately tore it open. "Take care of my eyes. I love you, Matt." Moral: never kick those who hold you up at the worst of times.
The Thirsty Crow. After flying a long distance, a thirsty crow was wandering the forest in search of water. Finally, he saw a pot half filled with water. He tried to drink from it, but his beak wasn't long enough to reach the water inside. He then saw pebbles on the ground, and one by one, he put them in the pot until the water rose to the brim. The crow then hastily drank from it and quenched his thirst. Moral of the story: if there's a will, there's a way. Every problem has a solution if we just look hard enough and don't give up. Lazy John. There was a boy named John who was so lazy he couldn't even bother to change his clothes. He wanted to eat some apples, but he was too lazy to climb the tree and take the fruits. So he lay down underneath the tree and waited for the fruits to fall off. John waited and waited until he was very hungry, but the apples never fell. Moral of the story: laziness gets you nowhere. If you want something, you need to work hard for it.
Reborn. There was once a bitter, racist man. It wasn't his fault. He was taught not to like people by the color of their skin by his parents. He never thought to get his own ideas as he grew up. He went through his life quite satisfied, but with bitter and twisted hate towards anyone who was a different color to him. After a while, he lost his wife, who couldn't stand his hatred towards others any longer, and he grew old and weary. Upon his deathbed, he still held the hate within him. After death, he awoke and found himself looking at a mirror. "Who are you?" the reflection asked. "I'm John. Are you God?" "Am I God?" "Far from it. But you have a second chance, John." "What's that?" John queried. "You can return to Earth as a man who will become a professor, but you will not be white. Or you could—" "Option B," said John. "I'll choose B. Anything's better than going back down there as someone who's not white," he said with a chuckle. "Are you sure?" said the reflection. "Definitely," said John. "Okay, but there's a catch," stated the reflection. "You will remember your previous life and this conversation." "That's fine," chuckled John. And with that, John was reborn. John grew up to be a kind and generous man who loved and liked everyone. He was friendly and always grateful for any help he received. He remembered who he was before and the message the reflection gave him, and he promised to be the opposite of who he was in the previous life. He enjoyed being nice so much more than he expected. It felt good. It felt right. John was reborn blind. He could not see color anymore, nor could he see anything. There was no hope either, as he was born without eyes. But he lived a more fulfilled life, surrounded by people of the world who he befriended through their personalities and individualities rather than their skin color. He married, had a huge family who adored him, and traveled the world. He respected all and was respected and loved by all who knew him. Moral: learn to see past things people cannot change or are born with. We are all human, and one person does not represent a race, culture, social class, or sex. We are all equal and deserve to be treated just as you deserve to be treated.
Once there was a dog who wandered the streets night and day in search for food. One day, he found a big juicy bone, and he immediately grabbed it between his mouth and took it home. On his way home, he crossed the river and saw another dog who also had a bone in its mouth. He wanted that bone for himself too, but as he opened his mouth, the bone he was biting fell into the river and sank. That night, he went home hungry. Moral of the story? If we always envy what others have, we'll end up losing what we already have, just like the greedy dog. The Hare and the Tortoise. There was once a hare who was friends with a tortoise. One day, he challenged the tortoise to a race. Seeing how slow the tortoise was going, the hare thought he'll win this easily. So he took a nap, while the tortoise kept on going. When the hare woke up, he saw that the tortoise was already at the finish line. The hare was shocked and annoyed. The tortoise won the race while he was busy sleeping. Moral of the story: overconfidence can sometimes ruin you. The power of perseverance is amazing. Even if all the odds are stacked against you, never give up. Sometimes life is not about who's the fastest or the strongest. It's about who's the most consistent. The Proud Rose. Once upon a time in a desert far away, there was a rose who was so proud of her beautiful looks. Her only complaint was growing next to an ugly cactus. Every day, the beautiful rose would insult and mock the cactus on his looks, all while the cactus remained quiet. All the other plants nearby tried to make the rose see sense, but she was too swayed by her own looks. One scorching summer, the desert became dry, and there was no water left for the plants. The rose quickly began to wilt. Her beautiful petals dried up, losing their lush colour. Looking to the cactus, she saw a sparrow dip his beak into the cactus to drink some water. Though ashamed, the rose asked the cactus if she could have some water. The kind cactus readily agreed, helping them both through the tough summer as friends. Moral: never judge anyone by the way they look.
A great man died and went to heaven. He asked the guard if he could see hell before he entered. When he arrived in hell, he noticed a grand banquet table with the finest food, but everyone that sat around it was starving and miserable. The guard explained that in hell you are given forks that are 5 feet long, and you have to hold the top of the fork to be able to feed yourself. As you can see, it is impossible to do so, they starve. Upon seeing this, the man wanted to return to heaven immediately. When he entered the pearly gates, he saw the same table, food, and forks. He was confused. "You see," said the guard, "in heaven they have learnt that if you feed your neighbor will feed you."
The Midas Touch. There was once a king named Midas who did a good deed for a settler. He was then granted a wish by Dionysus, the god of wine. Midas asked that whatever he touched would turn to gold. Dionysus tried to prevent it, but so it was bestowed. Excited about his new earned powers, Midas started touching all kinds of things, turning each item into pure gold. But soon, Midas became hungry. As he picked up a piece of food, he found he couldn't eat it. It had turned to gold in his hand. Hungry, Midas groaned, "I'll starve." Perhaps this was not such an excellent wish after all. Seeing his dismay, Midas' beloved daughter threw her arms around him to comfort him, and she too turned to gold. "The golden touch is no blessing," Midas cried. Moral: greed will always lead to downfall. The Lion and the Slave. There was once a slave who was treated cruelly by his master. One day, he couldn't take it anymore and ran away to the forest to escape. He came upon a lion who couldn't walk because of a thorn in its paw. Although scared, the slave mustered his courage and took out the thorn in the lion's paw. When the lion was finally free of the thorn, he ran into the forest and didn't harm the slave. A while later, the slave was caught by his master. The master ordered the slave to be thrown into the lion's den. When the slave saw the lion, he recognized it as the same lion he helped in the forest. The slave was able to escape the den unharmed, and he freed all the other animals. Moral of the story? The good you did will always have a way of coming back to you. So do good deeds and be kind to others, and the world will be kind to you.